Now, Childminding Ireland, the national childminding body, has welcomed the new childminding regulations published yesterday. These regulations mark a historic moment in Irish childcare, introducing for the first time a regulatory framework for all childminders. To tell me more about what this means, I'm joined by Bernadette Orbinski-Burke, CEO of Childminding Ireland. Bernadette, you're very welcome to Community Radio Kilkenny City and indeed Kilkenny Today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay. Now, firstly, Bernadette, why do we need these regulations? Are we not regulated to infinity when it comes to childcare?
Well, we're hoping that's not what's going to happen to childminders. I know that sometimes we that the regulations are very burdensome and admin heavy. And that's two things that we are really hoping to avoid for childminders. And basically the reason we need them is that there isn't at this point any regulation of childminding other than if you're minding 4 or more preschoolers or 7 children of any age. And I think there's only about 66 TISLA registered childminders in the entire country. And for the rest of the childminders, who the vast majority of whom are doing a fantastic job, there's no pathway for them to be regulated. It was an anomaly, really. There was no pathway for them. So you were left really with a very sort of worrisome situation where anybody could set up as a childminder. There was no Garda vetting needed. There was no child safeguarding training or anything. So in order to protect children and also to give parents access to the grants that are now, you may be aware of, the National Childcare Scheme, which is quite generous now, you would need to have some accountability for the money. So that was another reason to benefit parents. But if I could just make a point about Childminding Ireland's members, there was no requirement for them to join us or meet our membership criteria, but they self-regulated. They got their Garda vetting, they got their first aid, they got their child safeguarding, they're insured and follow a code of ethics. So I don't want to give the impression that childminding has somehow been like the Wild West or something, because it wasn't regulated. It was self-regulating very successfully, but there were many childminders who weren't engaging.
Now, how do these new regulations benefit children who are quite happy in an environment chosen by parents with a neighbour or anything like that? And now you want, it would seem that you want to upend that situation.
No, we don't want to stop anybody We want to encourage and support childminders that's our role in Childminding Ireland. We spend our lives supporting and informing and representing all childminders, so that's definitely not our ambition. But I think we do need to be pragmatic and, in 2024, not to have any regulations to ensure child safety is unrealistic. I think we need to be open about that.
Okay.
I suppose. Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead, go on. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the positive things is that you may be aware there was a public consultation period of 12 weeks from February to May of the first set of draft regulations. And there was a huge amount of opposition to them from childminders. They weren't really reflecting the nature of the family home. And childminders were fantastic. They really got engaged. They responded to the public consultation and to our own consultation as well. We were able to go in and represent their views, and in fairness to the Minister and the Department, they did make changes, and the Minister did say all along, these are draft, I'm expecting changes. And we believe that the final draft now, which was published yesterday, it's workable. It needs childminders to process it, have a really genuine hard look at it, and see the changes that have been made, that they have requested, where not everything has been accepted, obviously, but a lot has. And the other thing is there's a 3-year transition period from when... Yep.
Yeah, and we'll come to that. We'll come to that in a moment. I just want to look at some of the key points of the new regulations, Bernadette. Mandatory registration with TUSLA for all childminders minding non-relative children for over 2 hours per day, for 2 hours or more per day. Is that right?
Yep. That's at the end of the 3-year period. That will become mandatory. Yep.
Okay. Garda vetting requirements then for all those people, even if it's a neighbour or looking after a child. When we say all, that means all childminders who are looking after a child over 2 hours. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And mandatory child safeguarding and first aid training as well?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
And just maybe expand on the eligibility for the registered childminders to apply to offer the National Childcare Scheme. Just explain that.
Yes. Well, it still will be the childminder's choice. If they're registered with TUSLA, they are then eligible to apply to administer the scheme. There's no obligation on them to do that. But it is... quite significant subsidy now for parents, even the universal section of the NCS. It's up to €5,000 per annum per child. So it could be a huge savings for parents. But again, there's a 3-year transition period before childminders are required to register, and then it would be their choice whether or not they administer the NCS.
Okay, so again, just to reiterate that point, just to be clear, for example, if my neighbour, who I trust with my life, never mind my child, is minding my child more than 2 hours per day, she will have to be, it's usually she will have to, during this transition period, register with TUSLA, get Garda vetted, and do mandatory child safeguarding and first aid training.
At the end of the 3-year period, if she continues childminding. But I have to say that TUSLA are looking at it as the core supportive compliance, rather than, a sort of catch people, punish people sort of view, which I think sometimes is an unfortunate thing that people think is going to happen. They want to be registered and stay registered, so it very much as helping people to be compliant rather than the alternative of sort of catching people out sort of thing.
Yeah. Now, if I was a cynic, and I'm probably capturing the thoughts of many people out there. Yep. If I was a cynic, I'd say this is an attempt to corral everyone minding someone's child other than a family member into a system where there is no longer any common sense anymore, paperwork coming out their ears, and red tape with no deviation possible, not to mention bringing all these minders into the tax system and ultimately creating a cash cow for the childcare industry and ultimately causing more expense to middle-income parents who are already struggling. That's a cynical point of view, which a lot of people would think.
That's a very cynical view, Eugene, to be honest. Certainly, I don't think childminders are going to be anybody's cash cow. It's unfortunately, it's a very, well, depending on certain areas of the country, if you're somewhere in Dublin, you might be able to charge a lot of money, but most childminders, the income is fairly minimal, really, for the work that goes into it. It's quite vocational, so I don't think childminding. You can not worry about that piece. I don't think it's going to be necessarily to create a cash cow. I think it's important, as you say, primarily women. We do have some men who are childminding, but primarily women, and it is important that they are in the system. That they are paying tax for their own pensions, if nothing else, and when we saw with COVID, unless you were a registered taxpayer, you couldn't receive the benefits that went along with the COVID period. And please God, we never get one of those again. But, there are certain benefits to being in the system, and we do like to push that for our members, that they need to mind themselves and have paid their stamps and be entitled to a contributory pension.
But Bernadette, there will be many out there. There will be many out there who, as I said, if I trust a neighbour with my life, never mind my child, there is going to be it's going to be very difficult to enforce that if the neighbour, if I don't want, if my neighbour is going to say, well, look, I don't want to register things, so I'm not minding the child anymore, and if I don't say anything, it's going to be very difficult to enforce that, is it not?
It will be challenging, and we really hope that childminders will give it a chance, look at it and see. It's certainly not huge intrusion into what they're doing. We organised for TUSLA and the department to visit childminder settings so they could imagine the regulations in the reality of being in a childminder's home. And we also had focused evenings with experienced childminders, speaking directly again to TUSLA and the department, raising their own issues about the various different regulations. So childminders have been through this with a fine-tooth comb and raised all the issues they possibly could, and not all of them, but some of them certainly have been changed and amended, and we're calling for this significant review at 18 months, and so that way we can evaluate how effective the regulations are being and what impact it's having on childminding. And as you identify then the problems, it also gives you 18 months to rectify them before anything becomes mandatory. So I think it's too soon to be sort of jumping to that cynical conclusion that this is all going to be a disaster. We want it to be a huge success and to the benefit of childminding. And we are hoping that the next stage, what's lacking at the moment is there's no financial incentive for childminders in this. It's very much acknowledged by the department that this is obviously primarily child-based and then parental family-based for access to subsidies. But I think childminders also need to be supported and acknowledge the additional demands on them. So there's that piece to be worked on as well. So
when, Bernadette, when it came into effect yesterday, the 3-year transition period, when does everyone start kicking off the registering with TUSLA? When will all that happen? It's actually,
the regulations were published yesterday, but they're actually commenced, which I believe that the legal term for passing through the Oireachtas on the 30th of September. So the 3-year period will begin on the 30th of this September. So any point within that 3-year period, if people want...
Sorry, you're losing you there.
Up to themselves, or they can wait and see how it goes and get feedback from other people who are in the system and from ourselves. And we want to support and help people with where they are at, what point they're at, and obviously encourage them to be open.
And where can people get more information on these changes, Bernadette?
If you want to email support@childminding.ie, we'll email you anything you can possibly need, or we can organise to have a chat with you on the phone. That's not a problem. We're delighted to talk to anybody. Listen, we're primarily listening.
Okay.
And we're trying to look and see if there are any themes that are emerging. And we will obviously be taking those back to the department and TUSLA as well. Okay, leave it there. Bernadette Orbinski-Burke, CEO of Childminding Ireland, thank you for joining me on Kilkenny today. No problem. Thank you indeed. No problem.